Kyle here from allmeatreviews.blogspot.com. Another King's X video today, Monday, October, what are we on, the 10th, October 10th, 2022. So, been making some progress in the book, although I'm almost caught up with what I'm listening to, but, so, yeah, I'm through the Faith, Hope, Love period, and well, I can understand more about the stories about Sam Taylor and the frustrations the King's X had with him, and that whole process with the label. And I didn't know this, but you learn stuff, of course, is that they signed initially to Megaforce, which was an imprint under Atlantic Records, but after the third album, after Faith, Hope, Love, they just became part of Atlantic Records. So in 1992, well, I mean, the first thing I was going to show before I show what full length they did, well, they were in tour, I guess, in Europe, Germany, I believe, or what the book talks about in here. They they wanted to put a song on the second Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which I think I have on vinyl, but I'll have to dig that out later or something, maybe when I'm done with this, but the song Junior's Gone Wild, which I wish I would have listened to it before I made this video today, but I'll have to revisit it. But I've always found this album good. It's got Faith No More. What's the song by Faith No More? Of course, the Go to Hell song by Megadeth. I always think of that because they have the sound bites from Bill and Ted, and I'm in tears laughing so hard. But that's partly just Mustaine's vocals. I forget what's the song by Faith No More they did. Slaughter has a song on here. It was 91 or 92. Well, this came out in 91, yeah. What was it? Dark Sullivan. Primus, Tommy the Cat. The Perfect Crime. Which I don't know if that was... I think that was a new song, too. I don't think that was on the real thing. Anyway. But Junior's Gone Wild, which I guess was a song that Doug had written that he wanted to put on Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, but Sam Taylor didn't like it. I don't remember what the details are mentioned in the book again. They didn't like it, but then they just had it, and Sam knew about the songs, like, that's the song we're going to submit to this soundtrack. So then they did do it. But, in fact, I kind of want to see the movie again. I want to go see this. I'd like to see this movie. I've seen this movie. I've seen at least parts of it over many times on television, just to see if I could spot unless it's at the end in the credits, where they used Junior's Gone Wild, so... But, so like their fourth album came out in 1992. Oops, I just kicked it. After they followed up Faith, Hope, Love, and they're doing these video shoots that Ty was talking about in the book, about these dangerous video shoots they did, and it was getting played on MTV, and they were in the charts and all this stuff. Really was the peak. Faith, Hope, Love was the peak of their sort of commercial exposure, to an extent at least. But so then they had a tour they were going to do with, who did he say it was? Not Blue Oyster Cult. Oh, the Black Crowes, and they turned it down because they'd been touring for 9 months straight. They did a tour with AC/DC in Europe, and the fans gave them crap. And ours went through a similar experience, I guess, but eventually they won over the fans. They said they had the best experience touring with AC/DC with the band themselves, but... So then they end up working instead of going on that tour with the Black Crowes, they end up working on, because that's when like Shake Your Money Maker came out and She Talks to Angels and a couple of other, that cover they did was on. I'd like to get that record on vinyl. I have it on CD. It's one of the first CDs I actually ever bought. But anyway, this album, the self-titled King's X, it ended up being self-titled, came out March 10th, 1992. So it was 2 years after Faith, Hope, Love, but this is the first album they did just solely on Atlantic, which would only be for 2 more records after that, I believe, their contract they had signed, and but it was the final record with producer Sam Taylor, which has a lot of it's got the cover of, which I always think of Shot of Love, See the Bread, See the Wine. But then I was in the book, I started reading about the self-titled last night. I haven't gotten into a lot of the details, but they talked, I think it was Ty was talking about, or maybe it was Jerry, they wanted like a Led Zeppelin 4 type thing where they didn't have, it had a picture and they didn't want the band, and the band's logo's there, and I've never really fully noticed it. It looks really dark there. I got the vinyl right here. Maybe see it better. I'm just banging this thing up. If I didn't damage it. No, it looked like the sleeve got hit, but not the case itself. Yeah, you can see it. You can see the King's X symbol there, but on the corner there. But the little girl who wants the breadcrumbs, and it's Gateful. This is the version that came out a couple of years ago because I couldn't find this. I like to get a first pressing. The first three albums I have, as I've mentioned before, but this one, I need to get the reversal. I need to get the new pressings of the first three. This pressing came out, I want to say it was like 2018, 2000, let's see if it says on here. This is pretty thick, just a black pressing. I think people just refer to this as a self-titled. Like they refer to like Led Zeppelin 4 as Led Zeppelin 4. Sometimes Ruins. They just refer to it as a self-titled. 2016. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, the label's just standard black. It's like 180 gram and everything. But and revisiting now, and I originally bought this album on cassette, like the other, like many, like Faithful Love and like Dogman. Maybe Dogman. I can't remember. Maybe it's just those two. I have distinct memories of having a bunch of their albums on cassette, but it couldn't have been too many because I don't remember, Gretchen and All That's on Planet. But Faithful Love was such a dense and deep and epic record. This album, to me, has always been sort of like a natural follow-up in the sound and style. And the only thing I'll say is, listening now again today, Faithful Love had that democratic where you had a lot of songs where you had Doug and Ty singing. That happens on a lot of these songs, but I think Doug is driving more of them than he did even on Faithful Love, except a few exceptions. Not Just for the Dead and Dream in My Life clearly are Ty songs, although Dream in My Life, it's always a song I've liked, but having listened today, I think that's a stellar track. I think that I love the bridge part. I forgot about that. The bridge is the little groovy riff in the middle, but then just sort of the epic nature with Ty's vocals and the sort of major key kind of climax. It's a very happy, like optimistic song. It reminds me a little bit of like Kevin Gilbert's Joytown. The sort of, there's reasons to be happy. We're gonna go somewhere, but this album, the self-titled, it's consistent like Faithful Love, but even almost a little bit more. Although it's not conceptual. It's probably less conceptual than if there's any conceptual element to Faithful Love. There's even less to this. This is just them writing a lot of different songs, although they flow well. But The World Around Me, Lost in Germany, and Black Flag are like the sort of. Those are just 1, 2, 3. The Lost in Germany is maybe the catchiest song they ever wrote. It's a crime that song didn't ever make the radio, or that's a song anyone could sing along to. That's like a Jellyfish or like I'm trying to think of another band. It reminds me of it. They hit it all the park with that song. Lost in Germany, the lyrically, I believe a lot of that had to do with their tour in Germany, and they ended up going to this like dinner like 100 kilometers away from the venue with AC/DC and everything. I'm pretty sure that's the reference on that. Oh, good lord, the vinyl actually includes Junior's Gone Wild, so it's a good thing I showed that. So they added that. But that was like I said, Doug mentioned in the book that originally that was supposed to be on Gretchen. Interesting. I need to listen to this. They should have Junior's Gone Wild on Spotify with the self-titled. It's the first track on side 3, of this, the second disc. Let's see if it's the first track, and it goes Not Just for the Dead. Because the cassette and the CD I always had did not have it. No, it goes right from Oosong to Not Just for the Dead, but I love Not Just for the Dead, though. Oh my, that's the sort of Beatles-ish elements with the sitar is used. Then there's like these other songs that are big. Prisoner's another one not to discount. That track is terrific. Love the way that sort of the acoustic guitar element, the rhythm to it. the sort of gang vocals at points. But then you go from to the Big Picture, Chariot Song, and Ooh Song. Those songs are all tracks that grew on me over time. I always liked them, but it's like the more you listen to them, the more they sort of get into your head, and there are a lot of them are sort of very riffy, a lot of kind of slow burns, but slow burns in a good way, and they're not super long either. Big Picture, Doug mentioned in the book about Curtis Mayfield. Interesting. A Chariot Song, he talked about Kansas. There's the song Magnum Moses, that was his Kansas. I always think of, was it the Charles, what's it, that, a chariot, it's sort of in Roman times, chariot riding along with the horses on the chariot. I also think of like Chariots of Fire, but I always think, and that to me has always had like a biblical element to it. Ooh Song is good. That's the one, I think. Is that the one, or Chariot Song they mentioned? Out of the Planet Comes Gretchen, Faithful. They mentioned the first three records. What I Know About Love is okay. I mean, it's clearly to me one of the lesser, if not my least favorite track on this album, but it's still not bad. That one plods along to an extent as well. The hook is not quite as strong, but it's still there. It's not bad. And then there's Silent Wind. Silent Wind's the closer. The only thing I'll say about Silent Wind is that this album is full of sort of songs that you kind of enjoy, but you think that Dream of My Life would have been a perfect closer. If I reordered the track, I put Dream of My Life last, I know where Silent Wind would go. Silent Wind sounds like a Led Zeppelin thing almost at points. No, I mean, World Around Me, I hear that as like roaming music at concerts and other places sometimes. The self-titled record was, it's hard because the way that the sound, the guitar, the detuned guitars, especially Ty's influence sort of in just the overall instrumentation on this album and on Faithful of Love especially is so prominent with those detuned guitars and those power chords, but they always, kind of blend in with the other instrumentation they use. I'm thinking of Chariot Song that they use the cello, which sounds almost like a Beatles. I was thinking Beatles, Rubber Soul kind of thing, or like All You Need Is Love, the way they use the cello in that. But this is a terrific record. It's even though it was sort of in a time where the band was definitely needing a change. They were kind of based on everything that had gone down with between Gretchen to Faith Hope Love, and then everything with Faith Hope Love with the radio stations. And this article with David Frick that was published in Rolling Stone, he interviewed him in Europe, and then he ended up focusing, even though they were trying, the number one thing, and Sam Taylor told them this before he came and did the interview with them, don't talk about the Christians thing at all. You're going to get pigeonholed, you'll ruin your career. And it's kind of precisely what happened, though they didn't talk about it on the record. David Frick kind of didn't really tell him everything he was doing, and he ended up talking to Doug for a long time, I guess, according to the accounts in the book, the Greg Prato book. He only talked to Ty for like 30 minutes, so that whole Christian thing. I mean, some of it is sort of on the nose. I mean, the lyrics, there's a lot of biblical elements, a lot of spiritual elements, but unfortunately, someone made a comment about Jars of Clay, and then later Creed were able to sort of be described or considered that Christian rock, but they didn't let it prevent them. And it's something like, there's a quote from Billy Corgan in there. It's like, if King's X had come along like 5 years later than they did, if they'd come around in like the mid '90s, they probably would have been enormous. But in some ways, I remember the thing about King's X is that their style, they have too many styles that they can't be fit into one thing, but that's hard. It's hard to sort of attract them and market them, and maybe that's why they lost sort of the attention that they were getting a little bit from MTV. In the early '90s, it was all about MTV and radio for the most part. Getting a video on there, that's what made or break. Not written reviews, album reviews in magazines and newspapers didn't do as much, but obviously what happened with David Frick and Rolling Stone did in some ways, because a lot of the radio stations didn't want to play them after that. They found, they're a Christian band, they're all about God and everything, but whatever had happened, that's of the past, that was 30 years ago. So That all being said, I think this is a terrific record, and it kind of continued along the fourth record in whatever it was, 5 years or 4 years actually. Was it 4? It was 92 and 88. So actually, it's 4 and 4 years. It was 5 and 6 years or whatever. But well, they didn't. No, it's been 5 years because you include 88, 89, 90, 91, 90 to 5 years. So as far as where the self-titled album compares in the year 1992 for me, of course, again, I still wasn't on board at this point. I do want to look up some of the concert history though, just to find out, how often they had come here when they were doing all this touring. They'd come here a number of times before I saw them first. I think it was '96 with Galactic Cowboys. But I have Dream Theater's sort of breakthrough album, Images and Words, at number 1. So it's interesting. That album came out, I believe, in the summer of '92. Like June or July. I think it was July. This self-titled King's X came out only a few months earlier. And they had known, I don't think they had connections because Portnoy was a fan. Anyway, they had known about Dream Theater and everything like that. Of course, later they worked with some of the members of them. And Doug appeared on Falling Into Infinity. Number 3, I have Shadow Gallery self-titled. 4 is Three Sides to Every Story by Extreme. My favorite Extreme album. Number 5, Faith, Hope, Love. Hold on. Alright, so sorry about that. Of course, I get interrupted by my phone frequently by people that are calling me. Not Faith, Hope, Love, but Faith No More's album Angel Dust came out that year. But I don't think that song off of the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Perfect Crime, was on Angel Dust, though. I actually have that on vinyl too. I like Faith No. I've always been a Faith No. Well, not always, but I've been a Faith No More fan for a while. No, it's not on. No, Perfect Crime isn't on there. Of course, it's the same name of a Decemberist song. But just going down the rest of the list from '92, you had The Lizard by Saigon Kick, which wasn't their best, but it wasn't a bad record. Peter Gabriel's Us, which had some pretty big hits. The first album he had done in a number of years, and of course it would be another, whatever it was, 9 years than he did. It was 10 years. It was 2002 that Up came out. And he hasn't put out a new album of new material since, of course. XTC's Nonsuch, I have at number 8. Psychotic Waltz into the Everflow, number 9. Rage Against the Machine, self-titled. That was a big deal back then. The last sort of, according to my wife, like really decent, good Michael Nesmith album, Tropical Campfires. Angra's Reaching Horizon, which was like an EP. It's like a sort of introduction to the Angra as a band. Oops, I just went way up. 92, On the Sunday of Life from Porcupine Tree, Dada's Puzzle, Automatic for the People from REM, which I still like, even though it was popular. I like some of the stuff in it. Ekelin, Suffocating the Bloom, Human Touch from Springsteen, Toto's Kingdom of Desire, Katie Lang's Ingenue, Weird Al Yankovic, Off the Deep End, of course. The Black Crowes album, The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, came out that year. I'm pretty sure Shake Your Moneymaker was like the year before. Core from Stone Temple Pilots. 92 was really the really big part of grunge, and so this album came out, the self-titled, even though, they, obviously had a pretty big impact, big influence on a lot of the grunge sound of grunge bands. This was still competing against the grunge albums that were coming out around this time. I could say, actually, Faith Hope Love, but Faith Hope Love came out really before a lot of that stuff hit. So it was like kind of even though these albums are similar, this album is kind of, in some ways, not thought of as often as Faith, Hope, Love. I think maybe part of that because it came out amongst Nevermind and Pearl Jam's verses, or Pearl Jam's 10 and Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. Was that year? I don't know that they had an album before that, but they had already had their sort of breakthrough album come out, and Alice in Chains. All the grunge bands, a lot of them had been listening to, and Stone Temple Pilots, even although they weren't, still consider them grunge exactly, but They weren't from Seattle, unlike those other bands, or were based in Seattle. It turns out Alice in Chains, I don't think, was actually from Seattle, but they moved there. Anyway, what was I getting at? Black Flag is another one I think of when they did, maybe talk a little bit about the Woodstock appearance, especially when they get into the Woodstock 94 stuff in here. I'm pretty sure it was that one where Doug mentions the songs for Beavis and Butthead, and they played Black Flag. I always think of Beavis and Butt. That, and then I was at least one, maybe two concerts. There was at least one girl who kept on asking for Black Flag. And this was, long after this album came out. This was in the 2000s, but I've always liked Black Flag, but I mean, I can see why people like it. Halloween song, it's a very catchy number. It's simpler, but it has a groove and energy to it, like a lot of their songs. I just think in the sort of like being brought on and like loving a lot of songs I love from them. I don't think of this album as among my favorite songs from the album as much as so many of these other songs. But it's still a really good song, and I still think among, like, where it would compare on the new record, it's kind of interesting. It would probably be one of my favorite tracks on there. So, anyway, what's your take on the self-titled King's X album? Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you for subscribing if you did subscribe recently. But anyway, what's your take on the self-titled King's X album? Hopefully be doing Dogman tomorrow. But until then, I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. See you next time.